All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Thursday, everybody. I hope all of you guys are having a great week so far. Round one coverage of the NBA playoffs here at Hoops Tonight is brought to you by Chase Freedom Unlimited. How do you cash back? We're going to keep the show super simple today. Just going to hit all three games from last night. The Grizzlies evening up their series against the Lakers without Ja Morant. The Milwaukee Bucks winning impressively against the Miami Heat without Giannis Antetokounmpo. And then a really interesting comeback from the Minnesota Timberwolves in Denver to take a late lead, only to fall behind 2-0. I want to get into that a little bit. Some things that I think might lead to the Timberwolves getting at least one win when they go back home. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Volume's YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT so you guys don't miss any show announcements. And if for whatever reason you guys miss one of these videos and you can't get back over to YouTube to finish, don't forget you can find them wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. All right, let's talk some basketball. So this particular game for Memphis was a game that a lot of Lakers fans saw coming. This season, they have not played well as the favorite. When they are desperate for one reason or another, typically this year it's been because of one of LeBron James or Anthony Davis being out of the lineup. They start 2-10. Then LeBron has I think it was a groin tweak, if I remember correctly. And Anthony Davis just puts the team on his back and springs a winning streak, right? And then LeBron James returns, and they falter a little bit. But then Anthony Davis goes out with his foot injury, and then LeBron James puts the team on his back and carries the team to around a 500 record without Anthony Davis, with all the roster imbalances from the Russell Westbrook situation, just grinding out as many wins as possible to float the ship long enough until the trade deadline gets there. Then the trade deadline gets there, and LeBron James gets hurt. And now Anthony Davis is floating the team again. But then LeBron returns, and they immediately drop a game to Chicago in a really uneven defensive effort. This has been a consistent theme for them. When their backs are against the wall, they play with the requisite effort, focus, and energy, and they look like a really impressive team. And then as soon as they get into a position where they're actually considered a favorite, they let their foot off the gas. And this series, they started as the underdog, and then really controlled game one. And again, a lot of Grizzlies fans are going to be like, hey, we were close there at the end, and then the Ja Morant injury, blah, blah, blah. The Lakers were in complete control of that game throughout. Every single time Memphis made a run to get it close, the Lakers would immediately put their foot on the gas and make another run. You could tell from a matchup perspective, the Lakers match up really well with the Memphis, and as long as they're committed to the defensive details of the game, they're the better team. And you even saw that a little bit in this particular game. But they came out, once again, they win game one, and they become the favorite. They become a significant favorite to win the series. Then you announce Ja Morant's out. All Lakers fans are immediately like, oh, here we go. I tweeted before the game, I expect this game to be close and wouldn't be surprised if Memphis won, just because they've been playing down to their competition in situations like this all season. Now, to Memphis's credit, this is a very good basketball team without Ja Morant, always has been. People ask why. It's really fundamentally simple. I said this a little bit to Colin Cowherd last night. And by the way, we did a pretty deep dive into a bunch of specific Western Conference series in that show with Colin last night that I encourage you guys to check out if you haven't done so yet. But I was talking about this with Colin last night, this idea that if you have a baseline set of ingredients, that you can win in the NBA. A couple of specific things you need. You need a really good rim protector so you can build a base defensive scheme. Because as long as you have a good rim protector and you get your perimeter players to play hard, you're probably going to be able to get a certain amount of stops just by funneling guys into your rim protector, chasing them off the line, even if you have defensive limitations elsewhere. You have to have guys that can get dribble penetration in one way or another, right? And for Memphis, it's Desmond Bane coming off of off-ball actions and then slashing down the lane. Tyus Jones can do it in pick and roll or a little bit in isolation as well. Dylan Brooks, it depends. But you have to be able to get some kind of dribble penetration. From there, as soon as you start getting dribble penetration, it's kickouts to guys, right? And now they're attacking closeouts. And all of these guys were all-conference players in college, 25 to 30 points per game guys in high school. And so if you get them in situations where they're attacking with an advantage, they're going to be really hard to beat. And consistently over the last couple of years, the Grizzlies, without Ja, have been bigger, more athletic, with real rim protection and enough offensive creation to get defenses into rotation. So they've been really good without Ja, particularly at home. And this was a game that I would argue, under the circumstances, with the shifting motivational factors, with the Lakers taking an early lead, with Ja Morant out, this was actually going to be a tougher game for them to win than the first game would have been, where things were a little bit more static in terms of motivation, and they just didn't bring it. I thought, specifically the front court for Memphis, I thought set the tone early in this game. Xavier Tillman and Dylan Brooks got a couple of early stops on Anthony Davis post-ups, did really nice work of absorbing his bumps and walling up. And Anthony Davis, really from the start of this game, had a very physically passive approach to the game on offense. There's a huge difference between Anthony Davis when he is going to the basket with reckless abandon and getting fouled as a result versus going to the basket with the intention of drawing a foul. I saw a lot of Laker fans complaining, why is Jaren Jackson getting a superstar whistle? Why is Anthony Davis not getting a whistle? It's pretty simple to me. Jaren Jackson was the far more aggressive offensive player offensively. A lot of times people confuse getting fouled or I should say the free throw disparity with the team that's being more physical being the one committing more fouls. It's usually the opposite. The team that is the more physically aggressive from the start on both ends of the floor typically gets the benefit of the doubt from officials. On the defensive end of the floor, when you're consistently physical, they don't want to blow their whistle on every single possession because they want to maintain some semblance of flow to the offense, right? Or to the game, right? So you can get away with more that way. On the offensive end of the floor, if you go physically aggressive to the rim, the refs are actually more likely to reward you with free throws than if you go into the rim hunting for fouls or passive hunting for contact and things along those lines. In this game, Jaren Jackson attempted more free throws because he was the more physically aggressive offensive player. Anthony Davis, one of my favorite players. His ceiling is as high as anybody else in the league, but he is notorious for these types of games where he just comes out, plays physically passive, starts to miss those little hook shots and push shots that he usually makes, and then suddenly he can fall apart on that end of the floor. And it was a huge problem for them offensively in this game. When you get nothing out of your second and third highest paid players, in this case D'Angelo Russell and Anthony Davis, that can be a huge problem. But I want to give them credit. Xavier Tillman and Jaren Jackson both soundly outplayed Anthony Davis. Xavier Tillman held up really well against Anthony Davis in isolation defense. Jaren Jackson, they stuck him on Jared Vanderbilt and just completely ignored Jared Vanderbilt to blow everything up at the rim. They played really well. They got contributions off their bench. I thought Luke Kennard made a bunch of really important, timely threes, including one in the second half where he caught and kind of hesitated. One of the downsides with Luke Kennard throughout his NBA career is as good of a shooter as he is, he can be a little bit gun shy. And some of that is he shoots a little bit down low in front of his face. And so if you get a good closeout on him, he's a little hesitant because he doesn't think he's going to be able to get that shot off. But he kind of hesitated, and then he ended up shooting it anyway and made it. That was an important shot. David Roddy, it was interesting. He played a lot early in the game because of foul trouble. David Roddy was getting relentlessly attacked on the defensive end by the Lakers. They were picking on him. Specifically, LeBron was picking on him. But he made two spot-up threes on possessions where LeBron basically conceded threes to him. And that just erased all of the negative elements of his defensive limitations. I think he got attacked 3 or 4 possessions. But he scored 6 points on spot-up threes. That kind of recouped some of that damage. But all around, just a great effort for Memphis, a team that's been really good at home all season. They're going to be a difficult team to beat with or without Ja. In the Lakers, I said this before the season, or before the playoffs, and I truly believe it. I said that going into that play-in matchup with the Minnesota Timberwolves, that I would pick the Lakers to win the title if they demonstrated in that environment that they were the significantly better team throughout, essentially as a demonstration of their commitment to the work. And that wasn't what happened. They didn't really start trying defensively against Minnesota until the second half. They ended up getting the win. That's great. But I have been really concerned, especially with LeBron James and Anthony Davis, with their lack of understanding of what this is going to take. This is going to take consistent effort throughout. You can punt a game against the Memphis Grizzlies and still win a series just because you're better than the Memphis Grizzlies. Here's the problem. You're only going to be very slightly better, if not slightly worse, than the teams you face the rest of the way, because it's going to be one of Golden State or Sacramento, who are both better than this Memphis team, in my opinion. It's going to be one of Denver or the Clippers or Suns, all three of which are better than this Memphis Grizzlies team with all of their frontline limitations. Going to the Eastern Conference, Boston or Milwaukee coming out of the conference, or maybe even Philly, they're going to be better. You do not have the margin for error for this type of performance at that stage. The Lakers started turning it up defensively when they fell down 66-46, and they immediately started getting stops, and they immediately crawled their way back into this game, but it was too big of a deficit too late. You can afford to do that against Memphis. You can't afford to do that against other teams. Couple other notes on the Lakers real quick before we get out of here. D'Angelo Russell. This is the second time in 3 postseason games this year that he's looked not just bad, but really bad. And this kind of goes back to what I was talking about with Colin Cowherd last night. These overly finesse players versus strength-oriented players seem to go down a level when they get to this part of the postseason. And, you know, it's funny. I was thinking about it earlier today. When we go to NBA history and we look at like the top 10 players of all time, or let's just call it the top 20 players of all time, you're going to see a lot of bigs, right? Like a lot of centers. You're going to see a lot of big forwards, right? You're going to see guys like LeBron James and Larry Bird and Magic Johnson and, you know, guys like Kevin Durant, right? But then there's like these 2 6'6" guards, right? Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan. Both of them are 6'6", at least a 6'10" wingspan, freaky athletes, like 40-plus inch verticals. Both of them were dunk contest guys, like incredible physical advantages. And then there's one exception. There's one exception when you're looking at the greatest players of all time that is a undersized, under-athletic finesse player that had success, and it's Steph Curry. And he's literally the exception that proves the rule. It requires I would argue that when you combine overall shot-making ability from various spots on the floor as a jump shooter, off-the-dribble shooting and movement shooting, ball handling, if you combine all of those things, I think Steph Curry is the most skilled player that has ever played the game of basketball. So you literally have to be otherworldly skilled to compensate for a lack of physical advantages at this level. D'Angelo Russell is a slow finesse player that likes to methodically work to his spots, but he's not big and strong enough to do that against playoff level defenses, and he's not skilled enough to compensate for it. There were 2 plays in this game that I want to demonstrate as an example. There's a play in the first half where he rejected a pick and roll and he drove hard towards the baseline. There's kind of like an opening in the baseline because the pick and roll coverage was prepared for him to go to the middle, so he had a chance to go baseline. He ends up hitting the Jets hard, but he can't generate an advantage. So he ends up checking up and taking like a one-legged fall away bank shot off the glass that he barely grazes the front of the rim with because he leaves it way short. And I'm like, okay, that's a problem. Second half, he tries to isolate Luke Kennard. Kind of beats him off the dribble. Luke Kennard bumps him. It's probably a foul in the regular season. It's probably a foul. But in the playoffs, a lot of that stuff gets let go. And he just can't quite turn the corner on Luke Kennard. That's Luke Kennard. That's not Anthony Edwards. That's not Jaden McDaniels. That's not even Dylan Brooks or Desmond Bane. That's not one of the better defensive players on this team, let alone in the league. And he just can't get around him. And he ends up shooting some wild left-handed scoop shot that he ends up leaving way short that he can't get all the way to the rim. Again, like these super finesse-oriented players, they need to know their role. And this is where you're starting to see some issues with D'Angelo Russell. His shot selection is the problem here, not his skill set. Austin Reeves is thriving in this role despite being a less skilled player because he's very picky about when he goes to work. He needs the right matchup, the right coverage, and then even then when he's making the read, he's looking to pass that thing unless he's got a really good situation where he thinks he can get a defender out of position to draw a foul or to knock down a shot. And he's a 50-40-90 guy, just about. Not quite, but he's nearly a 50-40-90 guy. He is an excellent shot maker. He is a guy that is going, from a skill and touch standpoint, is going to make most of those shots. So by being super picky and by having the requisite level of skill, he's been a functional player in the playoffs. D'Angelo Russell is trying to play the same style that he has in larger roles on other teams in the playoffs, and it's not working. He needs to embrace a little bit more of Austin Reeves' approach, a little bit more methodical, a little bit more of a pass-first approach, be hyper-aggressive as a spot-up shooter. That's where he could be super valuable with this Lakers team. Take the spot-up threes. He can be a devastating off-ball player for this team, but I think he needs to adjust his approach on when he has the ball in his hands. And then, hey, maybe a little bit more Dennis Schroeder. He hasn't played much in the series, hasn't played well, but it's not like D'Lo is playing well enough to take his minutes. I'd give him a little bit more of an opportunity. A couple other shout-outs. I think Rui Hachimura There's been a lot of attention around him because he's had back-to-back 20-plus point games in this series. But, aside from the scoring piece, he's actually been playing really well for a few weeks now. We talked about this a little bit with Colin last night, but when he got traded for by the Lakers, he was considered the starting forward. Then they trade for Jared Vanderbilt, and he gets slotted to the bench, right? And he kind of struggles for a little bit, but the position battle actually helps him. He ends up working really hard with Phil Handy to try to earn his way back into the rotation from a skill standpoint. He's communicating with LeBron James to find out where he's going to get his shots from. He's communicating with Darvin Ham about where he can help in the effort and physicality areas of the game. He's become like a legit, kind of rim protector option for them because he's such a good athlete around the basket. Good help defender overall. He's been great grabbing contested rebounds. All the dirty work stuff was there. You were just waiting for the offense to come along. And he's always been a guy that's been really comfortable shooting out of the mid-range, but hasn't quite been able to put it together to be consistently aggressive in ISOs. He's been attacking closeouts well and knocking down those one-dribble pull-ups, but he had been struggling punishing smaller defenders in the post. He's punishing smaller defenders in the post now. He's starting to get comfortable knocking down those turnaround jump shots over both shoulders. And then the big one, Rui Hachimura has a little bit of a hitch in his jump shot. He's very slow into his release, particularly from the three-point line. My theory there is he likes to use a higher release point on mid-range pull-up jump shots, so he's actually a lot more fluid on his mid-range pull-ups than he is on his catch-and-shoot threes. But you can tell if you look at his shooting, if you look at his jump shots from this series compared to some of his for the Lakers in the regular season, he's much more fluid shooting from three now. They've managed to get rid of that hitch in his shot. He's quickly getting rid of the basketball, transferring energy well, and now he's starting to knock down those spot-up threes, which is a huge game changer for him. And the last but not least on the Lakers front, as a silver lining, LeBron looks great. I thought that was the best he looked physically post-injury. He had a really nice post move on David Roddy where he went right around him with quickness. He's getting downhill to the rim. He looks more comfortable as a shooter. I like the signs that I'm seeing from LeBron. So here's the thing. The Lakers, they toasted this one off. It was an impressive performance from Memphis. I still think they're the better team in this series, but they have to bring the requisite effort. This Memphis team is not going to lay down. That's a big part of why I think this series is still going to go 6. I would not be surprised if Memphis won a game in LA or won game 5 back in Memphis. The Lakers are going to have to earn this, and Memphis is going to make them do so. All right, we're only going to spend a little bit of time on the other two games from last night, just because these two series in particular, in my opinion, are not nearly as competitive or interesting. But I do want to share some thoughts from my film sessions this morning. So the Bucks started out really well in this game 2 against the Heat. They obviously felt confident that they could win without Giannis. My guess is Giannis plays if this is a series that's a little bit more competitive, and they just completely blew it open in the second quarter. Obviously, Giannis is the best player in the world, but even without Giannis, Milwaukee's advantage over Miami is the same, which is we're just bigger. This is a Miami team that plays a relatively undersized center in Bam Adebayo, whose benefit really to a defense is ability to switch. And the problem is if you're a switching defense, you need good aggregate size so that the whole lineup can gang rebound and the whole lineup can gang rotate and help at the rim and things along those lines, right? And every single time Bam Adebayo gets switched out onto a perimeter player, you've just got a massive player going against an undersized player underneath the basket. Jimmy Butler made a lot more sense when he was alongside PJ Tucker and there was another big forward that can battle with him. No, now Jimmy's playing the 4. They can go with guys like Kevin Love, but he's just not the right athlete to be able to win some of those battles under the basket. They are just too undersized. And in game 1, it was all Chris Middleton and Bobby Portis. You remember? They were just posting up, drawing multiple defenders, shooting over the top. Those guys lit everybody up. They still went for 29 in game 2, but in game 2, it was all Brook Lopez. And it was ridiculous. It literally looked like Brook Lopez was an adult playing against children in some little kids YMCA league or something. He's just setting ball screens, rolling down to the rim. He's just holding his hands up high. They're floating the ball to him in the air. He's elevating over everyone to catch it and just finishing over the top. He's too damn big. And then even Drew Holiday. Drew Holiday's only 6'3", but he plays a big physical brand of basketball, and he physically worked his way to every spot that he wanted on the floor. Those two, I think they combined for almost 50 points in this game. They just dominated them with size. Miami just can't possibly hang with them physically in this series. They're competitive. I picked them to steal a game in this series. Obviously, I expected it to be back in Miami. I didn't think they'd steal game one, but obviously the Giannis injury played a big role there. But they just, as interesting as this Miami team is, as good as Jimmy Butler is, as good of a coach as Eric Spoelstra is, as good as Bam Adebayo is in the right type of system of versatility, they just simply are not big enough or athletic enough to cover for those disadvantages, especially in a matchup like this. You know, I've seen a lot of talk about the Miami going for a big trade this summer, and I'm pro that too. Like, I think they should go after someone like Damian Lillard or Bradley Beal, but don't mistake the fact that that will only cover one of their problems. It will help them in shot creation, it will help them in depth, but they do eventually need to take seriously their problem with size and athleticism. All right, moving on to Wolves Nuggets. This was a super interesting second half. I was at a dinner last night with my wife and some of the people in her industry. And I was kind of keeping an eye on the game in the background, and I'm looking up there, and it's like, Nuggets are up 20. Okay, cool. Like, I don't have to pay too close attention. Next thing you know, I look up, and the Wolves are actually winning the game. And I was like, okay, I cannot wait to watch this game tomorrow morning and see what happened. Well, it really was simple. Minnesota's a very good defensive team, and they played stifling defense in that third quarter. I talked a lot about in game one how their best groups were actually the Cat at center groups. They had a lot of success in game one with Cat at center with Gobert off the floor. It just gives them a better chance to succeed in the half court offensively, right? But I said, and this is true, that Rudy Gobert was the better defensive option, especially on Nikola Jokic. Big shock, he's one of the better defensive players in the world. Well, it was offensive issues where Rudy Gobert was hurting them. In game two, though, in that third quarter run, Rudy was doing a nice job on Jokic. They were getting stops. They were flying around athletically. Kyle Anderson getting hands on basketballs and stripping dudes clean out at half court. Anthony Edwards flying in from the weak side to block Nikola Jokic at the rim. And then they're just running it down their throat. Minnesota got out in transition 15 possessions in this game. 7 of those were in the third quarter. So almost half of their transition success came during that third quarter run. It doesn't matter how limited your half-court offense is if you can score in transition. In this game, they averaged 1.4 points per possession in transition versus 1.03 points per possession in the half-court. That's another pathway for them to have success. And then in the half-court, it really dawned on Anthony Edwards in that third quarter that Jokic had no chance of stopping him when he got ahead of steam towards the rim. Ant made, I think, 5 threes in this game. So it was pulling Nikola Jokic further out to the level of the screen to contest Anthony Edwards on those pull-up jump shots, and Ant was just blowing by him. But it really didn't have anything to do with that because even at the rim, Anthony Edwards was having no trouble sidestepping around him when Jokic was deeper in his drop. Like, that's a legitimate weapon for Minnesota moving forward in this series. Anthony Edwards knows now that they cannot keep him away from the rim. That was a huge advantage. It was in the half court, it was Anthony Edwards. In transition, it was everybody, but a little Ant as well. On defense, it was Rudy Gobert and guys flying around in rotation. They ran that run. They sprung that run with the defensive end of the floor. And that's an interesting thing for them to look forward in this series where it's like, okay, we can play a certain style with Cat at center that is a 5-out attack, but then we also can play this like defensive brand of basketball with Gobert at center and get out in transition. The Nuggets bench ended up being what turned the game around in the fourth quarter. A couple of specific things stood out to me. That was a Karl Anthony Towns group, and every single time you got a smaller defender on him, and Aaron Gordon was guarding him for most of the shift, but even when he gets switched, and this is really the fundamental problem with Minnesota's half-court offense, is their two big guys, Rudy Gobert and Karl Towns, cannot beat switches with physicality. Like, Rudy Gobert can't do anything except for offensive rebound occasionally. Karl Towns, like, this has been a consistent theme. The Lakers did it to him multiple times. Like, let's switch Dennis Schroeder onto him. Let's switch Austin Reeves onto him. You know, the Nuggets can switch anybody they want onto Karl Towns, and he simply cannot back them down. He does not have that ability to do anything other than just run them over and commit an offensive foul. He doesn't have that little bit of extra body control element to get them stuck on one shoulder so he can pivot off and spin the other way or slowly back them down without committing an offensive foul. He really struggles to beat switches at the rim. He's primarily functioning as just a stretch big. And so teams can switch actions against Minnesota, and it just stifles them on the offensive end of the floor. And then on the other end, Denver ran their entire offense through Michael Porter Jr. running off screen actions. and he was able to draw a foul and get a 4-point play. Then he drew another foul driving to the rim, and they were just able to turn, I think it was a 2-point deficit into like a 4-point lead when Jokic returned to the game. And that was the difference in the game, in my opinion. Down the stretch, obviously, Jokic was phenomenal. They ran some inverted pick and roll, a lot of inverted pick and roll. That was a good way to attack Rudy Gobert. They had a lob dunk to Aaron Gordon where that like Karl Town, he had Aaron Gordon set the ball screen like really low, like at the free throw line. And then Jokic just basically dribbled over both Cat and Gobert stayed with Jokic. He just threw that looping pass over the top to Aaron Gordon to knock it down. Michael Porter Jr. hit another big jumper at the free throw line. And then throughout the entire game, one of the unsung heroes was Jamal Murray. He was a big part of how that Minnesota Timberwolves run didn't get out of hand in the late third quarter. His shot making has been at the level you would hope for it to be for the Nuggets to have a chance in this postseason. You know, Colin said last night, he goes, "Are we sure that the Nuggets aren't just going to win this thing?" And look, man, they very well could. I had my 3 teams that I had as the best chance to win the Western Conference were the Lakers, the Warriors, and the Suns. And so far, the Lakers don't look focused enough. They can't be bothered to try hard consistently. The Warriors are down 2-0 and lost their most important defensive player for a must-win Game 3. Doesn't mean they can't win, but they're in a tough spot. And then the Suns literally can't generate anything other than a pull-up jump shot in the mid-range. So, I mean, here's the thing. If the Nuggets might end up winning this thing just by hanging in there long enough for these other teams to get beat because of their own flaws. And so, you know, I'm not going to change picks until the end of each round. At the end of the first round, we'll take a look at it, and I'll kind of refocus on all of that. And I still expect the Lakers to come back and win the series. I'm still not ready to jump off Golden State. I wouldn't be surprised if they won the series at all. If they win in Game 3, I expect them to win in Game 4. Then all they got to do is go win a game in Sacramento. And I still expect Phoenix to beat the Clippers and figure some stuff out as the postseason progresses. So I'm not changing any picks at this point, but Denver absolutely can win this Western Conference. And they look sharp. They have a bunch of specific things that I've noticed, like Jokic in that third quarter. That's the first time in this postseason that he really got exposed defensively. That's going to happen again at some point in this postseason, but they present enough problems for teams offensively. Jamal Murray looks good. Michael Porter Jr. looks good. Aaron Gordon and Jeff Green are doing a lot of dirty work at the forward position. They've got a lot of things going for them, so it very well might be them at the end of the day when we are coming out of the Western Conference. Last note. Going back to Minnesota, I do think that the Timberwolves are going to get at least one game, maybe even 2. And the main reason why is their defense is real. This is a real playoff weapon, what they can do to teams defensively, flying around with their length and athleticism, and even without Jaden McDaniels, which is crazy. And at home, I think they're going to be able to get a lot of stops and get out in transition. And so I would be shocked if they didn't win one of those 2 games, and I actually think it's on the table for them to get a second as well. Although I would pick Denver to win the series either way. I think they can slow down Minnesota's half-court offense enough to get enough wins in this series. All right, guys, that's all I have for today. We're going to be back later tonight after the final buzzer of Kings Warriors and Clippers Suns to break down those games as well as Game 3 of Brooklyn Philly. As always, I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you later tonight.